There are also more seats on this side of the room. They're kind of invisible, but I'm not sure we're going to have enough seats for everybody. Thank you all so much for coming out. But yeah, we'll at least try to fill them all in. So anyone that, yeah, all right. We'll give everyone one more minute to settle in and settle into their seats.
Hi, I'm Marianne.
Bill.
Nice to meet you, Bill.
Hi.
I'm Marianne.
Ryan. You too.
Okay, I guess we will get started now. Thank you everyone so much for coming out. For anyone that hasn't been to a Techstars Boston affiliated event, I'm Jonathan. We run like monthly events just kind of for the startup community here in Boston. And along with me for this event are also, I just really want to thank the Harvard iLab for hosting us in this beautiful space, as well as JP Morgan as well, who is a partner with us for this event and help make it possible. So I'm going to try to limit the talking I do because we have two really amazing speakers here today. I'm just going to kick things off. I mean, I don't think either of them really need much introduction, but I'm going to, I guess, start with Steve to give a kind of a quick introduction on yourself and what you're working on now, and then we'll do David as well. So take it away.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having me. Very nice to see everyone here. I was a Harvard undergraduate, class of '84, which is really when they first invented that computer science major thingy. Anyway, so had a lot of fun. Started a company right out of school with some classmates that was in the software development tool space. That grew very quickly. It was a lot of fun. It was about a 15-year ride. And I got to see it go up to 150 people before it went down to about 10 people and was sold at fire sale prices. And I mention that, which is not actually in my bio written that way, but I mention it simply because on the way down with the layoffs and I learned way more than on the way up. And it's really helpful as many of you are starting businesses, to view the things that are going wrong as great learning lessons because you're learning them when they're nice and cheap. The company was called Centerline Software, and by the time I was learning those lessons, so much of the damage had already been done. At any rate, I then went off to start a company called TripAdvisor with some other co-founders. That one almost went out of business in year 2, barely turned it around with a few dollars left in the bank before it took off, and it was hopefully some of you use it. And then I stepped down about 16 months ago, roughly, after running the company for 22 years. We were bought. We started in 2000, bought in 2004, repatriated to be part of the Expedia Group in 2005, went public independently in 2011, and then ran as a public company for a while, roughly. And then stepped down, as I say, about a year and a quarter ago to start a new company, to try something brand new. Spent a few months thinking what it was going to be. Eventually settled on it being a company called Give Freely. It is a shopping assistant that you install into your browser. It finds coupons for you, and the cool twist is that every time you buy something at any one of 10,000 stores, a commission gets paid from the store to me, and I donate all of that to the charity of your choice. So, do me a favor, when you get home, go to givefreely.com, sign up. We need the installs. We have about 100 now. That's not very many. And I need to get to 10 million. So if you each do your small part, I would greatly appreciate that.
So brutal following somebody like Steve. couldn't have had me start first, could you, Jonathan? This would have been so much easier. I'm David Parker, and really glad to be here. Like Steve, graduate of Harvard 1 year after him, it's the class of '85, and I also went to the business school. I had a long career in entrepreneurship, but it started with 10 years working for really large companies. And so I think I got through that 10 years, learned a bunch, and said, no more. It's time to get out and creating new things. So after graduating from the business school, after 10 years in the media industry, early 90s, internet arrives. Everybody that says the internet is essentially like a magazine or a newspaper, so let's hire a bunch of people from that industry into the internet space. So I jumped quickly, which was the smartest move I could have made. And then for 15 years was involved in 6 different startups that were all sort of birth of internet related kind of companies. Unfortunately, I chose them well. 4 of the 6 ended up with very successful outcomes. One of them is sitting next to me, so I was on Steve's board of directors and then started a company within TripAdvisor that did other stuff like that. So always very small companies, riding a wave as fast as possible and taking advantage of that, immediately jumping to another company. Hard to pull that off, but boy, I tell you, if you can do it, it's an amazing experience. After I finished that and had some success, and I just want to also throw in that part of that experience included some angel investing, so I sort of dipped my toe in that water. And then got into helping others get into entrepreneurship. And so for the last 11 years have been involved in founding CEO of an organization called Entrepreneurship for All, or E4All, which was launched north of here in Lowell and then Lawrence, and expanded now to, I think they're in 9 or 10 different communities across the country, helping folks who have ideas for businesses that can't get invested in, is the better way to put it. So small ideas that are really intended to help a person get some extra income. Maybe they can get out of that job that they're in that they really hate and turn it into a full-time gig, and then see if they can create value and wealth for themselves. So when I left E4All about a year ago, we had created 1,400 companies, and there's a new CEO in, and they're hoping to do that number again in probably 5 years as opposed to 10. So it's great to see the continued growth. I mentioned the angel investing before because that's primarily what I'm doing now. And so I and some sort of fellow investors who are sort of watching to see what I do, I'm looking for companies that I can invest in. The 2 categories that I'm concentrating on are businesses that are run by folks of color, and secondly, businesses that built into the business model is to try to affect climate change. And Techstars is a great source of leads for me. I can literally go to all the websites and find those companies and send the kind of email that how many of you are founders of a company? So if you got an email from somebody out of the blue saying, I'm an angel investor, do you want to talk? How many of you would reply to that email? It better be the same number of hands, that's all I have to say. So it's sort of a test, but of course everybody responds, and so that lets me engage with them and see if there's a good fit. So that's primarily what I'm doing now, so back to you.
Awesome. All right, well, now that we have these great introductions done, I also now want to take a poll of the audience to figure out exactly who we have here with us. So David kind of already started that, but I want, a raise of hands. Who here are founders? I guess we already did that. Do we have investors in the crowd here too? Yep. And then what about operators? So running companies, maybe helping out at startups. Okay. And then lastly, who are students in the crowd? Awesome. Okay, so beyond the introductions, the way we want to probably run this event is mostly kind of as a fireside chat. People submitted lots of great questions, and I think there's just a wealth of experience that I think David and Steve can bring. And we want to just make this a helpful forum for people with their questions. I do want to start with a few because thank you to everyone that did submit questions when they registered for the event. There were definitely a few common themes, so I did want to start by covering a couple of those topics. The first thing that a lot of people asked about was, what is the first thing to do when you have an idea and are trying to get started? I think you know, like, hey, their idea stage, a lot of people that have like this entrepreneurial mindset, like, you know, like me personally, I had like the notes app, all the different ideas I had, and it was like, you know, figuring out what should I actually work on, at what stage do I actually want to jump to that, and I think that's something that a question a lot of people had, and I was just wanted to ask both of you on thoughts on like how to just get started starting a business.
I think I better take that one, because coming out of eForAll, if I can't answer that question, something's really wrong. My advice is, I have an idea for a business. There's two avenues. The first is, do you want to do it by yourself, or do you want to have a team with you when you get started? Personally, I was always a team person. I just loved having other people around that I could bounce ideas off of and see if hopefully they shared the same passion, and we could all work together to try to figure things out. So that's the first thing. There's nothing wrong with being a solo entrepreneur. Just got to look at your own personality and see what you're happy with. The second is take that idea and test it. Before anything else, find somebody, hopefully a bunch of them, of people who you think would be a likely customer for what you want to do. And really, really get to know them. Like, spend time with them. Ask them what they're doing. What's the problem that you're trying to solve? Do they see it as a problem? Are they frustrated with whatever it is? Is it too expensive? Is it hard to do? And start doing your own research into your customer. At eForAll, we had a small accelerator program that we had all these folks with ideas for businesses, many of which were kind of, you might call them lifestyle. In other words, I have a skill set and I want to create a business that lets me take advantage of this skill set that I have, which is great. But does anybody need it? Does anybody want it? And what's the value that you're going to be creating when you start this company? And so we force them very quickly out to talk to customers, potential customers, and find out who those folks are. What I like to say to entrepreneurs when you get started is find a segment of your customer base that is jumping up and down excited about your company. And they're so excited about it and the product or service that you're going to be offering that they don't care what you charge for it because the value is so high. You know you've got a good idea when you have that kind of a segment, because you can get started with the easiest possible customers. They're going to give you feedback. They're going to be first in line. You don't have to do any marketing to find them. You might as well start it that way, right? Start easy. Don't start hard. You don't have to look for a segment that's really difficult or very expensive to reach. Because that sort of means that, guess what? This is going to be a hard slog. If it's really hard to find customers and we have to pay for it, a lot of money for it, then we're going to have to raise a lot of money, or you're going to have a much harder way to get started. So I'll stop there.
I was only going to add a couple of points. One, it's great to hear what your friends have to think. Ask them, they might contribute good ideas, and then ignore the rest of what they say, unless they are going to buy your product or service. And I have a little different perspective on the no matter how much it costs. I tell people, find 5 people, which seems certainly reasonable, and ask them how much they're willing to pay for whatever you're offering. Add up that amount, and then go figure out whether you think you can make the economics work. So many people I've spoken with have chatted about a cool product or service, and have told me a story of how they asked a prospective client, and the reaction was, yeah, I mean, let me know when you're done. I might be interested in it. Like, kiss of death. You didn't do it. That's not what they wanted. They're not going to pay for it. That's a polite brush off. Or keep me on the beta list. Good. What you want to hear is like, well, how much are you charging? I'm like, well, hey, I'm not going to offer that. Would you be willing to pay $1,000 an hour for it? Or whatever the number might be. But go test those higher price points and wait till you get the I'm not going to pay $1,000 a day, but maybe $500, and you start to hear the positive signs that you're looking for. And if you didn't hear from that customer, find another one. And if you can't find 5, change your idea.
Let me just follow up on that. So we did surveys. We had our entrepreneurs do surveys of their potential customers. And we didn't let them ask the question of how much would you pay for this. Steve did it the right way, which is, would you pay this amount? and you come up hopefully with a price that's incredibly high. Like start as high as you can, and then negotiate down from that. But don't ask potential customers, what would you pay for this? Because what are they gonna do with you? They're gonna negotiate, right? That's just human nature, you negotiate. So they're gonna start low and see if maybe they can get whatever that product or service is at a low enough rate. So it's sort of in that art of trying to figure out how much value are you creating? And as we put it, like start high, come down a little bit, wow, you're creating a lot of value. So that's part of the whole process.
Yeah, so there's like, obviously just so many different things you need to do to get started with the business, right? There's like business strategy, figuring out pricing, customer discovery, building your MVP. It's definitely usually too much for one person to do. I guess sometimes there's solo founders out there, but another very common question, David, you touched on this as your first point, was like finding the team and finding co-founders. A lot of people in the audience had like questions like, how do you find co-founders? And I don't know, maybe Steve, you could take this one. Tell me about like your co-founders at TripAdvisor and how exactly how do you build that initial team?
Sure, I think we both probably have perspectives here. In all of the different companies that I built, it was either people I already knew, which is not going to be the person asking the question, or somebody that knew somebody that I knew pretty well. And so my advice would be network. Network the bejesus. Tell everyone you know, hey, I'm looking for a CTO, a marketeer, a whatever the role is, and kind of be ruthless about it in terms of how out there you are looking for people. And the question for someone, well, I know somebody, like, would you hire them as the sort of quality check, or are they just sending a name? Some folks will, hey, I don't know this person at all, but they seem to have a good reputation. Good, have an interview, have a great conversation. If you think this is great, don't bring up the co-founder stuff. Have 3 more dinners with them. Like, just spend an incredible amount of time, because unfortunately, having a bad co-founder mix is a really ugly way to start a company. And so spend as much time as you can.
I think what I'd add to that is Steve and I have a fair amount of perspective of having worked for a number of different companies and different founding teams. And so you're spot on in terms of like find people that you already know, that you're really, really comfortable working with. You're probably going to put an incredible amount of time together. And if you're a normal startup, there will be all kinds of bumps in the road. There'll be all kinds of twists and turns that your company's going to go through. Don't believe it when you ask a successful founder of a business that it was like, oh, it all happened exactly like I figured it would from the beginning. It never, ever happens that way. So you want people that, just are locked into your passion, your drive, your vision of where you want the company to go. And if you're literally hiring for a founding team from people that you've never met before, I think you're going to have a lot of challenges. The second thing I want to mention is think about the founding team in the perspective of building a very successful long-term business, which is an incredibly hard thing to do as a startup founder, particularly if you've never done it before. Steve is a master of this, right? So as he starts talking about Go Freely, you'll start hearing him talk about, like, this is where I plan to be in 18 months, in 3 years, et cetera. And that's because he's done it before. But that's the hallmark of a really, really successful entrepreneur, is somebody who's thinking about long-term value creation, having a company that lasts, hopefully, a really, really long time, and building value every year as you go forward. And the reason I mention that is that your founding team may not be along for the ride for the whole time. And that's perfectly fine. I'm an example of that. I was at 6 different startups for roughly 2 years each. And there was something that happened that caused it to be a time to like, oh, do I want to stay with this or not? And I would jump and I would join another startup. And I would add value in that next startup phase. I love the early days. Not everybody does, but I love that, the uncertainty and the sort of excitement of it. people who stay at a company for a long period of time have a different mindset, they have different skill sets, and they can be enormously valuable if you get them in early enough. However, they might be frustrated if the early days are full of uncertainty, because they may be thinking, like, I'm going to run this part of the business, I'm going to run sales, or I'm going to run marketing, or I'm going to run the technology. And if things are going left and right, and they're like, holy crap, like, come on, can we just get this figured out, because I want to build a department and I want to move forward. They may not be the right people for that founding team. You may want to bring them in after a year or two when things are more settled, you have money in the bank, that kind of stuff. Hard to make those kind of decisions, but I think a really good CEO who's thinking long-term can actually go through that kind of thinking as they think about the team that they want to work with. Hope that makes sense.
Can't resist just adding one small additional piece to that. If you're the type of founder that's really going to put your heart and soul into this, you're not clocking out at 40 hours a week or even 50 hours a week. You might clock out at 55, but you're still thinking about it during some other hours, which is not a requirement for the job, but a lot of founders do think that way. Find a co-founder that matches your personality. You'll be really frustrated if you have somebody who, like, no, my work-life balance, I'm out at 40, 42, 43 hours, and you're like, what the F, I'm here 60, 70, I am putting everything. Anyway, you guys get the message, just make sure that that's a meeting of the minds. Neither way is right or wrong, but that personality conflict could be a problem.
All right, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep going. Be careful hiring friends, because you're already friends. Let's say you're coming out of school, you were roommates or whatever, you're somebody that you really know well, and your personalities are perfectly in lockstep. You go to this, whatever, all aspects of your life, you're in sync with each other. In my opinion, a strong founding team shares goals, shares work habits, same passion, but they bring different points of view to the team. I always feel like I make the best decisions when I have people around me who are different from me, different perspective, different backgrounds, different all that, because they can then challenge me and say, I think we're going to go here, and they're like, not a chance, it's a terrible idea. It's like, okay, I got to think this one out. And feel like that helps me to make better final decisions for the company that I'm involved with. I don't know, do you agree with that?
I do. Okay. Yeah, it's a lot of work in the early days, right? Like, if you're not just putting in 40 hours a week. I mean, a lot of the founders in this room know, like, you're grinding like nights, weekends, just to get things off the ground. And as probably a lot of founders in here have also experienced, like, you really don't have any money and aren't really paying yourself, right, to start things off. So another popular question was, so once you kind of find that founding team and you've kind of, gotten that off the ground, like, at what point, do you start looking for funding, and like, how do you, where do you look for that? And you guys both, you touched on the fact that you guys both actively angel invest in companies. That's one form of funding, as well as obviously venture capital in different forms. What is your advice for, like, at what point do you start exploring that as an option, and then how do you just get started with that?
You got to look right away. It's hard to get a company going without some money. And it's to a certain degree, it's a validation of your idea, right? If somebody's willing to give you some money to help get started, then you've convinced them of that. So that's not a bad starting point already. Going through, you heard me say before, find those customers and get that feedback loops and get people excited, put the pricing out there that Steve is suggesting, so that whoever you go to ask for money, you have that kind of a story to tell. Doesn't have to be a polished deck per se. Like, that's become the norm, but polished decks can be a real pain in the neck. Friends and family is a completely legitimate way to start a business. Just tell whoever those friends and families that you may lose this money. Right? At eForAll, we would always talk, we had literally sort of lessons for our entrepreneurs who are not going to be able to raise money from actual equity investors or angels. But they did raise money from friends and family to get, a few $1,000s could go a long way if you're starting a relatively small service company. But that person, grandma, the aunt, a sibling who's giving you that money, we asked the entrepreneur the question, if you lose that money, can you still have a good Thanksgiving dinner with that relative who gave you that money? And you got to think about that, right? You don't want to like ruin a family relationship because you took their money and it didn't work out. Guess what? Most startups don't work. All right, so you just got to understand that. As much as you think you're going to succeed, the odds are against you. And so we literally counseled the entrepreneurs at E4All on how to have that conversation in advance. And even if you take a piece of paper and just say, I'm taking $3,000 from you, I'm going to put it towards this business. I hope to be able to give it back to you with a little bit more, when I reach this sort of level. And if it doesn't work out, then we're both okay with that, and we're still going to be okay at the Thanksgiving dinner. Like literally write out something like that and have them both sign. And then you sort of you level set expectations. But friends and family is not a bad way to get started. You're not dealing with quote unquote professional investors who are asking all kinds of tough questions. You're just getting started. And as Steve or Jonathan alluded to, many founders don't take money anyway. So if you can pull that off, if you're lucky enough to be able to pull that off, that's fine. But that's a starting point. As far as getting that first professional investment from an angel, it's not easy, right? Angels can be a pain in the neck, and I'm one of them. And we ask a lot of questions, and you may not have the answers. And so just know that, Jonathan, how many angel groups / investment groups have you talked to?
Do I have to answer that?
Just go ahead. It's in the dozens at least,
Yeah,
right?
you're gonna get at least 30 no's before you get your first yes.
Right.
From someone that's not like friends or family, right? And then the friends or family, they're like, they're gonna usually just do it. They're like, okay, I believe in you, right? But yeah, no, you're gonna get lots of no's,
Right.
and you can't get discouraged by that,
Right.
for sure.
So it's a hard way to get started. But it's sort of it's become the norm. And yes, there are angel groups. I would say the angel groups are actually somewhat challenging to get money from because there's so many people involved, and they kind of, in some cases, sort of have a committee basis of deciding. So therefore, you have to wait for that committee to reach that conclusion. So just keep that in mind. It's not easy to raise that money. And so I'll just throw it out there. If you can find a customer who's willing to prepay, what could be a better solution? That's a customer who loves what you're doing, is going to put money up front. You're not giving away any equity. You're actually you're building a balance sheet at the same time. Sometimes that's possible. If you can pull that off, that's frigging brilliant. And you will raise angel investment if you do that. Because speaking for me personally, I can't imagine any other investor would disagree. Like, what better sign of success than you were actually able to get a sale and get cash in the bank, even before you raised any money outside. So just put that out there.
So at Centerline Software, the first company I started, we had quickly gone through our savings, and one of the founders had to kind of go back to work because they needed the job. So point one, try not to quit the job until you have some money in the bank. It's fine to talk to a VC or an angel investor and say, as soon as we land this round, I will quit my job, but I can't afford to quit until we do. And we're all adults, we certainly understand that criteria. But we sold a site license to the product we were doing to the entire MIT university system, which, had we waited 5 years, would have been worth $500,000, and we sold it to them for $20,000, and it was amazing. It was the best news possible. I didn't feel like we were being abused or anything. That was $20,000 cash, and we had a good client, and like that. So in terms of the value that you might think of almost giving away whatever you're doing, if it's a high margin business, give it away. There's plenty of additional customers, and you really want that happy customer, the testimonial, and most importantly, the slide that says company XYZ is a paying customer for the angel investment check that they're asking for.
Yeah, I think proof points is a big thing, right? Because in my experience talking to angel investors as well, prior to quitting a job, sometimes they're like, oh, you should, it's kind of chicken or egg thing, right? You're like, oh, you should have already quit the job. And oh no, but I need the funding first for that, right? And I don't know, what would you say? Because there are like investors out there where they like want to see, what do they want to see? Like what are the great proof points that, can get that sort of commitment? From your perspective as like investors yourselves.
Not all investors are the same. And I'll just be blunt, some investors are jerks. So if an investor says, like, you need to quit your job before I invest in you, find another investor. I think that's totally inappropriate. So in finding investors who, like, you're literally comfortable having them be part, they're kind of joining the company. They might stay to the background and just wait for news to come from you, or they might call you every once in a while and say what's going on, or you, the CEO founder, might want to actually take advantage of them to help grow the company because of their network, because of their advice, their experience sets, etc. So it's a two-way street. Don't feel like you're always feeling, looking at it from a position of, God, I really need this person and I'm going to sort of say yes no matter what. Because that could, quite frankly, have a negative effect on the likelihood of success of your company. I mean, seriously. I mean, investors can really, really, if they sort of put their sort of hands down hard and say, I really don't want you to go in that direction, like they own a piece of your company. Are you going to get in that battle early on? It's no fun. It's a real distraction. So, hence, have a lot of meetings, meet a lot of people, have some questions that you ask them to make you feel comfortable that this is going to be okay. They're not necessarily joining your founding team, but it's not that far off. I recently looked to invest in a company, and they did 2 reference checks on me. I've never had that happen before. I didn't say no; it was fine. But I referred them to entrepreneurs that I'd worked with and invested with. But I was like, good on you. Like they wanted to make sure that the investors were good to work with, and were perhaps more than what the money was. So it's great.
Awesome. All right, well, I think I want to open it up now to questions to the audience. I'm sure everyone has a bunch of questions. I know I didn't even get to all the questions that people were asking during registering. So from now on, I guess we'll pass around a couple mics. I guess, Vic, do you mind giving me a hand here? Take this one. And we're going to want to do it in we're going to try to do it in rapid fire style. I'm going to make sure that we can get to as many people as possible. So we'll ask to limit. I guess I don't know.
Do you want us to choose people, or do you want to choose people to ask the question?
Because
you give them your mic. So.
Yeah. You guys, do you want us to call on some people?
We'll choose. Okay, great.
Yeah, let me go grab it.
Are these on?
Yeah, just hit the button. I don't need mic yet.
All right. There we go.
Hi, so my name is William, and quick question. So when approaching mainly VC firms, how do you avoid the issue of biting off more than you could chew? So say you get kind of greedy with the valuation, you let it inflate a little bit too much, you kind of realize you can't hit those benchmarks. You go to the Series B, you're not at that first valuation, you're not going to hit that next growth step. But early on, do you have any advice to just avoid that altogether? Like having a reasonable amount of funding, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think you're talking to folks that, in general, have worked at companies that built themselves up with a relatively small amount of capital, so I don't think we have the experience of the $100 million early stage rounds. Sorry. You don't mind if I tell the TripAdvisor funding script? So we raised $1.2 million very early on. In part because, hey, we had 20 years experience in a management team that had managed before, and that was our initial round. And then, hey, before we had any negative proof points, we hadn't launched the full product yet, the venture firm that invested was putting feelers out there. Hey, would you guys be interested in some more funding? They wanted a bigger piece of this company. And as CEO, I was like, no, why would I want the dilution? We're about to launch this product, and it's going to be awesome, and the valuation is going to be much better. And I went to one of my board of directors, who gave me the advice of Steve, when someone's handing you money or offering to hand you money at a valuation that's reasonable for where you're at, and hopefully better than the last one, but doesn't even have to be, take the money. And I sat on it for a while, because I didn't like that notion of the dilution when I didn't need it. I was sure that the product was going to be successful in about 4 or 5 months. There really wasn't any question in my mind. But listened to counsel, we took the money. The product was not successful in 4 to 5 months. It was not successful in 16 more months, and we almost ran out of money. Well, we would have been completely out of business way early. TripAdvisor would have been completely out of business way early on if we hadn't taken that extra slug. So I learned the lesson the good way that, yeah, some extra dilution for some safety net money, absolutely. I never regretted giving up that extra percent, and I advise investors, startups all the time, like, if you can, take more than you think you'll need, and if it's happens to be a flat round, if that's the best you can get, take the money.
Thank you so much.
Anybody else?
So my question is, are there seed funds that will be happy with, say, a $50 million exit, so maybe they would 5 to 10x their money instead of a $500 million exit or an IPO?
Absolutely. So, I'm just, look, the chance of success with angel investing or seed investing are very small. Seriously, it's like maybe 10%. So any win is a big win. So you don't have to like go to an investor and say, we're going to return you 50x, the valuation that we're starting with. That's just, it's too far out. You're creating expectations that are, in my opinion, inappropriate. So if an investor says, is there a chance that I could say, do 10x return on my investment? Okay. I think if you're a professional investor, that's not an unreasonable ask. And so just do the math. If there's a 10% chance of success, so I invest in 10 different companies and only one is successful, but I get, and they do the same amount in every one, and I get a 10x return on that one, I'm at break even, right? That's not bad. So if you can answer that question and say, at this valuation, this is how we can get the value that's 10x this. If an investor says that's not enough, then find another investor. That
Or
should
lower
be
your
just
valuation, right? If you have hopes for a 10 million valuation and a 50 million most likely outcome exit, and the market really isn't bigger than 75, so you just don't have any upside to excite people, well, maybe you need to raise money at a 3 million valuation. It's that same 10x math.
I'm laughing on that one, because Steve and I have co-invested in a bunch of companies for the last 15 plus years. And we were used to initial valuations that were somewhere between $1 or $2 or $3 million, right? And it pretty much never got above $3 million. And those seemed completely fair to us. Not like, oh, we're rubbing our hands together, we're just getting this so cheap. There's one company that Steve and I both invested in that became very, very, very large, very successful for us. And I introduced the founder to Steve, and Steve beat him down on the valuation that he was asking for, from like 3 million down to 2 or 2.5 million. And the founder just has been pissed at me ever since. But in the end, that was what you do. You do what you have to do. And to Steve's point, if you have to lower your valuation, don't think of that as some, failure. The valuations that come out of the Techstars, and I'm just having gone through the Y Combinator process, are just insane. I'll just be blunt about it. The inflation that has happened in the last 15 years on starting valuations is out of sync with market dynamics in terms of what kind of money you can actually return to your investors. And so you may get pushback if you come out and say, we have $5,000 of revenue and we're expecting a $10 million valuation. It's like, sorry, you're going to have to convince other people to do that because that's just not reasonable. So don't be afraid to try, but don't be surprised if you're going to get pushback, and be flexible. You heard what Steve talked about. Like when you're in a startup situation, you better be flexible. You know, to your original question about what happens if we can't hit those expectations that we set for ourselves. It happens, right? Your investors know that, so you work it out. You know, do you have to reduce your pay of your staff to get through that next 6 months before the next customer comes? That's normal. That's totally normal with startups. And do you have to do a down round or a flat round? You extend a round as long it just feels like the round is never ending? Yeah, that happens. Don't feel it as failure. You keep your company going. That's what counts. Don't shut down. Assuming you're on a good path, you have good customers, you know that what you're doing is going to make sense. Just stay alive. Thank you.
Hi David and hi Steve. It's wonderful to have you guys here. I've been working out of the iLabs for the longest time now. My startup's been incubated here. We were one of the winners of the Harvard Social Impact Fellowship Fund last year. And my startup's basically an e-commerce marketplace in the sustainability space. So we're in the climate tech space, and we're building a one-stop destination for all things sustainable. So in like a spin-off of Amazon, but a more sustainable version of it. And we're already in India with about 500 sellers onboarded, 10,000 products on the website. We're growing fast, but my question to you is, e-commerce has been around for a long time now, and who'd know better? But now it's really becoming a game of cash burn, and there's a lot of marketplaces coming up every now and then. And even though it's easier to get your first customers with whatever grants and the initial money you have, it's really getting to a point where whoever has more money can market better and is out there and wins the game. So at this point, startups like mine, which are profit with purpose, how do you get into the whole when you're seeking investment, even how do you realize how much is enough and still be relevant in the market? I'm not sure if that's clear, but
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of B2C businesses that have a great value proposition. If only the world knew about me, they would come and shop, and everything would be great. I'm not making light of the fact that there's great businesses out there, but for that pesky customer acquisition cost. And so, what I as an angel investor would be looking at in that pitch deck is show me how you've been able to acquire customers, either for free or through social or SEO, whatever the channel. How have you been clever about that? I assume you can, if you have 5,000 stores, products, I assume you can get 10,000. That's plenty. I'm not doubting the desire necessarily. So, that would be pain point for me. So you'd want to be putting in your deck how you've been able to experiment and find a channel that has potential to grow. And I'll add one other just angle to it. When I think about advising companies on how what their pitch deck should be, they finally raise their angel round, and then I suggest they start thinking about what the pitch deck is going to be for their next round, presuming they need it, and what those slides would look like, and then working backwards, what do you have to do to build those proof points to get to that spot? Because the vast majority of reasons startups fail is not because the ideas are terrible, but they didn't really have enough runway to get there. And if you're not always thinking about, not always, that's poor, but if my advice would be the goals of the next whatever runway you have is to prove what you need to prove for that next pitch deck. In your case, from what you've told me so far, it's customer acquisition.
The only thing I can add to that in terms of customer acquisition is you heard me say before about finding customers who are jumping up and down excited to buy or your service or, in your point, come to your website. And like I've been dying to come to this website. This is perfect, right? And so if that's the case, then to Steve's point, if you're on social media and you're spreading the message and people are just like, oh my God, I've been waiting for this. This is perfect. Customer acquisition cost, pretty damn small, right? I've been talking with a startup who is literally paying $600 per person to become a member of their service. I'm like, $600, how do you do that? And they're like, well, the money is going on all these paid channels, with Google search, $600. Could you not walk down the street and hand your customers $300 and say, will you come in for $300? And the entrepreneurs are looking at me and it's like, oh, that would save us $300. So make sure, like if that's a critical part of your business, like, find those people and to Steve's point, have a plan that like doesn't mean that you're paying outrageous sums of money to get your customers. You haven't thought it through carefully if that happens. Think it through really carefully. Like if that's a critical aspect, how are you going to reach those people? And is it repeatable? Is it scalable? That's the early stuff. That's the early stuff, not building the company. It's who are those customers and what does it take to bring them in? And hopefully it's not too costly.
Hi, Mark from Farmplex here. We talk a lot about successful startups, pitches, people you've invested in, but what about the startups you have not invested in that you wish you had? Why did you not? And compared to the ones you did, was there a certain quality or something that, if they had done differently, might have changed your mind about those ones that you were dreading not been a part of?
Good question. I'll try to answer maybe something similar while David has more time to think of a better answer. When I get the angel pitches, I am evaluating the founding team because I know the pitch isn't going to be how the company ends up. It's their best guess now. And so I'm looking for the individuals that listen very well, that are thoughtful about their answers, maybe have some history where they've done something, another startup or another something that hasn't worked according to plan and they pivoted or they changed. I like people that look back and say, all right, well, this wasn't working, this is what I'm gonna do next. And so that kind of flexibility as a founder. In the pitch deck itself, like how well do I think they know their customers? And if the answer is not very much, like, okay, I do not care about the financial slide. That's the result of everything that comes before. I then look and say, like, do I agree that the market is kind of big enough to be worthy of an investment? And then, like, how many soft proof points can they put up on the slides that say, people want to buy this, and here's how much we think they're willing to spend. And so I talk about mostly ignoring that financial slide at the end because I know a lot of entrepreneurs spend a lot of time thinking how hard and what the shape, but I'm like, oh, I did those things. I know it's all made up. So like, it really doesn't matter to me. But like, hey, we do have 1,000 beta users if you're at that stage. And you didn't spend any money getting them. All right, well, that's pretty good. You get 100 beta users without, but if you get 1,000, that's more than friends and family. All right, well, how did that happen? Tell me the story of why this started to spread. Again, I'm thinking of a B2C angle here. Where you got just 2 clients. You have 1 client, that's a little scary. You have 2 clients, I'm a lot more comfortable. Big step change for a B2B or a software or a service player. Because somebody who knows way more about your industry than I do put their real hard dollars there. So showing as many of the proof points that you can come up with is helpful.
You may not know this, but Y Combinator started in Harvard Square. And the guy who started it was the CEO of a company I worked for, Paul Graham. And he invited me to meet the first couple of rounds of, literally the first and second classes of entrepreneurs that went through Y Combinator. And I think it was in one of those two was Dropbox. And I had no interest in investing in Dropbox. So there's my one sort of like top of mind one that, damn, how many billion? Yeah, that's a big mess. And I didn't invest in it because I'm not a pure technology guy. I'm not a software guy. I understand business models. I just didn't understand what they were doing. And it's like, all right, that's just not a good fit for me. And I invested in a bunch of other companies that were in Y Combinator and with moderate success. So it happens. Like, you can't get too bent out of shape about that. But to Steve's point, like, just in terms of what do you look for, what should I have looked for with Dropbox? I'm not sure. Like, I feel like I want to be fully comfortable with what the founder's vision is and how they're going to do it. And so I don't look at that as saying, wake up every morning and saying, damn, I should have done it, right? It's kind of wasted effort. But I also was like, I was comfortable with my decision at the time. I became a customer of Dropbox, and every time I used it, I was like, damn. But you move on. And would I have done it differently? No. I was like, if I'm not comfortable with the business, I just don't understand it. That's not a good fit for me. So I guess that's my quick answer.
Hi.
Oh wait, for the last 5, we're going to do 5 more minutes of the Q&A, so I'm going to ask speakers rapid fire question or rapid fire answers so we can get through one of these questions.
I don't know if this is going to be rapid fire, but I was at a FinTech from operator to angel investor last week and got into some conversations that prompted a memory of organization from the Calvert Foundation, which hosted the Diaspora Impact Investing Initiative. And it went to the State Department, and I don't know what happened, but the idea of mobilizing communities around their communities to invest. This is actually sort of a question for the larger room in a way as well, testing an idea of what do you think about the viability of diaspora impact investing, meaning, I was talking with Nigerian community, for instance, and Caribbean community, and people that are wanting to put boots on the ground with an innovation. But I'm just curious. That's not a rapid fire question, but I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about it.
That sounds like after we get off the stage, we should have a conversation. I'm happy to talk to you about that. But yeah, I think we could easily go through 30 minutes of discussion. That's a very big sheet. Is that fair? We'll talk afterwards.
If you promise.
Yeah, I promise.
Okay.
All right, quick question. Yeah.
Thank you both for your insight, and I have a personal question for you, Steve. First of all, the TripAdvisor group was one of our first clients. I'll be quick, but I'm really grateful. I actually, I'm here with some colleagues from Techstars who have been there in this entrepreneurial journey for years, and it's a long human journey. I know yourself, you've been at TripAdvisor for more than 20 years. When did you know it was the right time for you to transition from your role?
And why did it take 20 years?
A very personal story. I'm delighted to answer. I'll probably pass on that in front of the whole group as well, but happy to find afterwards.
Hi. What, besides money, should a founder expect or maybe anticipate from an investor?
What stage?
Initial investment.
I'll generally suggest most angel investors are pretty passive. They hear the pitch, it's interesting. Hey, give me a call if you need anything. I've got my full-time job, my life over here. Just in my experience, CEOs that take advantage, that oh, Steve, you're a B2C guy, and I have a customer acquisition question. Can I hop on the phone with you? Yeah, I just put my money in you. Even 2 years ago, of course I'm gonna help you, but I'm not gonna go out of my, personality-wise, for me, I don't go out of my way to call up my investments and say, how can I help?
If you think you can ask for more than money from your investors, good on you. It's very, very rare that you're like, literally, it's like, I think I'll take money from him or her because they offer more than just a check, but so I'm going to pass on this other person. How often does that happen? It can't happen very often. But, you know, if you can get contacts and if you can get advice, take it, but don't expect it.
Caitlin Oksana, thank you so much for being here. What does PMF mean to you, and what does it look like when you have it?
PMF?
Product market fit.
We're showing our age here. We're showing our age. No acronyms.
I mean, when I think of it, it's like, yeah, there's a good percentage of the people that I'm showing this to that raise their hand and say, yes, I want to pay for it. You know, there's some exceptions to that rule if you're running a website that relies on advertising. You don't really need advertisers to say, okay, you just need traffic. But that's kind of the same, I'm now able to generate organic traffic or at a super low cost of acquisition.
It's all back to your customer, right? So do you have customers, and are they coming to you, are they excited, or are you paying a lot for them? That's it. Just find those customers.
Hi, I'm Geneva Bass. Thank you again for joining us. I'm curious, could you please describe the internal process behind some sort of pivot or significant change that had to be made within one of your companies? Thank you.
Sure, I can take this one.
How many hours do you have?
Yeah, if you read the history of TripAdvisor, you'll see that at almost year 2, we had a B2B business model that almost went out of business because we failed that very first test that David and I are now scarred by. We didn't actually, when we started the company, talk to a potential customer who was excited to pay us money. So we spent the first frickin' year after we built the product trying to find this customer that, of course, we thought would want to have this wonderful search engine, blah, 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 that we built. And then, like, holy shoot, there wasn't any of them. And we had to massively pivot the company. And the pivot plan went something like, all right, we're all gonna write some ideas on the whiteboard, and then we're gonna rank them. And the goal wasn't to pick the best one. The goal was to test the top 5 in 3 weeks. Like, we were just racing before we ran out of money. And the business obviously worked. We found one. The business idea or the model that generated revenue for TripAdvisor was not the number 1 or the number 2 or the number 3 ideas that were on the board. Fortunately, we went quickly enough that we found the one that worked, and then we said, great, we're going to skip all the rest and just go do that one.
I was at a company, we blew through probably half the money and realized that there was no market whatsoever. So it was a B2B play, and guess what? The B2B wasn't, sorry, it was a B2C, and we could not find consumers have any interest in our product. So we became a B2B company. Holy mackerel, that's a hard transition. It took a year, like literally a year. We needed all the cash that was left for us to engineer that, and I say engineer because the software development team was like, you're doing what? Like, I mean, any of you software developers out there, to go from, building an infrastructure that can handle consumers to one that's for businesses, that's like practically starting all over again. So it happens. That's why you heard me say before about make sure your founding team is ready for that kind of stuff. That's hard, that's stressful. It's very challenging. It happens. It happens frequently. Be ready for it. Have people by your side who can handle that kind of stuff. And not everybody on our team could. We had to cycle through a bunch of folks who were like, I can't handle this. This is what I expected to do with my job, and you just pulled my job. Yep, didn't work. Have to move on.
Our last question.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for being here. I had a question. You mentioned earlier the difference between investing in teams and single founders. Is there any meaningful difference for you when you look at when you decide, or do you even invest in a single founders?
You know, it's interesting. At Y Combinator, what I heard is that they pretty much don't allow single entrepreneurs. Like, you have to have a team that inevitably has a very, very talented, well-accredited, worked at some top-tier company in software development, or they won't even let you into their program, which I just find silly. I mean, that's Y Combinator just being a bully, kind of, you know, this is what we expect because we've seen so many success points, but that doesn't mean you can't have success as a single founder. It's certainly possible. Will your potential investors ask you about it? Yeah, if it's a technology company and you're not a technology person, that's not gonna work. But if you're a technology person who wants to be the CEO, which is what Steve was, that's fine, like, go for it. Like, he can manage it, he can hire the right people. So I don't think it's you have to do one or the other. Yeah, just be ready for the questions.
I'd say it's that additional risk for the angel investor. Again, if it's a service business that's going to grow to 2 or 3 or 5 people, and you know it's friends and family, totally cool because it's a one person shop. If it's going to be what I more think of as a typical angel going to Series A, then there's a big risk that whoever this next person isn't going to work out for whatever reason. And I'm not sure I want to take that risk after my money's already in versus they don't have to quit their job, but spend the time to go identify somebody who you've been working with for 3 months, even if you both have full-time jobs, and I'll be a lot more comfortable.
Don't forget, we invested in Bomb. That was just a one-person company.
I stand corrected.
Awesome, and with that will conclude, I guess, the chat portion of this event. So we have the event to go till 7:30. So I invite everyone to do networking, eat some food, and as long as you guys promise not to scare David and Steve off, you guys can, I guess, come up and ask some of those personal questions as well. But quickly, before everyone gets up, I do want to thank 2 people, or 2 groups. First, the Harvard iLab again for letting us use the space. Beautiful space, and we're very thankful for all that. And then also, we're very thankful for JP Morgan as well to help partner with us and put on this event. So and then the last thing for Techstars Boston, so we'll continue doing monthly events as well. The big day that's coming up soon is the current cohort's Techstars Boston's demo day, December 6th, right? So information, I don't know, maybe it's already been released, but that's the next big thing. 12 amazing companies that have been participating in that this fall. So, awesome. All right, thank you everybody. Please enjoy the rest of the event.
Do you have other Techstars events?
No, it's chill.
I saw this online. Signed
Sorry.